Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that A24 has more movies that come out in one year than any other studio. I could be wrong. So Past Lives is the newest A24 film, and it tells the story of two people who were once friends, dare I say a couple, and over the course of several years, they find a way to reconnect with each other. And as you would expect, life happens, they both move on, they both start a life separate from each other, and it begs the question if destiny and fate is meant to bring them back together. Now, when I first heard about this film, I was really eager to see it because I could tell that there was something about it that was going to be special. I know this plot sounds really cliche because when you take a girl and a guy who were together when they were younger and then they meet back up again so many years later, they're destined to fall in love, like, it's been done before. We've seen it. But I give this movie credit because it takes all of those Hollywood cliches and abandons it entirely. Because all the blueprints are there. You have the easiest cliche story that you could come up with a romantic drama, but this film decides to go against the Hollywood trend and make it about people who have history and who were once important to the other person, and revisiting that past life, as it says in the title. The film does take a more realistic approach to a situation like this. There are some things that are kind of ridiculous, but because this movie deals with the theme of fate and destiny, it gets away with most of that. Like, for instance, she's in New York, and once he visits her, he literally they run into each other out of the entire city of New York. All the people that live there, they just happen to be in the same spot. It's stuff like that. If this movie's going to do anything, it's going to make you look back at your life, your friendships and your relationships, and think about what could have been if things happened a little differently. I personally try not to think that way because I can get lost in that mindset. My dad always told me that the past is a great place to visit, but it's not a fun place to live in. And I think that's true. That's a very dangerous thing to do. We as humans do have a choice, and we do have free will to make the decisions that we make. But I think that's where the biggest flaw is in my philosophy of fate and destiny, is that I just personally believe that there's a plan for everything. Not that fate and destiny don't exist or that they can't come into play, but I do think that everything that happens in our lives as human beings is that it's supposed to happen the way it's supposed to happen, for our own benefit, even when we don't see it that way. And it's easy to look back on those things and think that, why didn't it happen this way? Why didn't it work out this way, the way that I expected it to? And really, the movie illustrates how some of these things aren't really possible. I would even say, I don't know if this is confirmed, I don't know if this is like if the director came out and said this, but there's always a gap between both of the main characters. It's in just about every single scene that they're in together. It's in the scenes when they're kids, it's in the scenes when they're adults. That same gap is even in the opening and closing credits. Like, there's a reason for that gap being in between things. Also, side note, I'm giving a huge shout out to the husband in this movie because the dude was super chill through the entire thing. I say super chill to an extent because, like I said, it is a realistic portrayal of this type of story. So he's not like, yeah, sure, go do whatever the heck you want. He's still cautious and still kind of reserved, like, this is a little weird. This is like your ex-boyfriend coming over for dinner, and I don't know how I feel about this. Not to mention, they both speak a totally different language that this guy doesn't even know. So there's always this disconnect there, even between him and his wife. He even says in the film that it feels like that she goes to this other world, this world that he can't reach her because he's never going to understand her on that level, and this other guy does. Like, that's kind of a heartbreaking thing. Like, that you cannot compete with that, husband or not. That guy's always going to have a one-up on you, and that does kind of suck. So yeah, it's awkward for him, but he still respects her and still loves her enough to let her go out and do this thing. That being said, the biggest thing that I took away from this film is just the questions that it asked. I thought this was going to send me back in time, like make me think of all my previous relationships and friendships and make me question if those things could have happened. I'm grateful it didn't because I'm married and I'm happy and I don't really want to look back on those things in that way. Also, if I ever tried to do this with one of my exes, I can guarantee you they would run the other way. Like, there's no way. It wouldn't happen. But the movie did make me sit back and think about the relationships that were a month long, or 2 months long, or a year and a half, or even 4 years. And it makes you sit back and ask yourself, why did these things happen the way they do when they did? And yeah, we can sit there and wish that these things didn't happen, especially if they were traumatic experiences, all we want. But at the end of the day, there are things in those times in our lives that lead to where we are now. Like, I had relationships that lasted 2 weeks, but one of those relationships led to me meeting one of my best friends. So like it or not, that relationship, as short as that was, I mean, if you even want to call it a relationship, it was important and it was a pivotal thing that happened to me in my life. And I think it's easy for us to hold on to those memories that we remember when we were younger, because it happened at a time in our lives where everything was so heightened, especially if it happened when you were a teenager. Because when you're a teenager, everything is up here. All your emotions, all your stakes, the end of the world, it's all heightened. So when you have all these emotions mixed in with falling in love and being with this person for the first time and experiencing everything for the first time, everything's cranked up to 11 and it's really hard to escape that feeling. And those moments stick with us. Those moments are important to us because of how it happened, when it happened in that time of our lives. There is a great exchange between these two characters that really puts something into perspective for me. And I'm going to be paraphrasing, but she says something like, I went on with my life, you went on with yours, and we're adults now. We're not kids anymore, but that little 12-year-old girl is always going to stay with you. And that is one of the most realistic, truthful things I have heard in a movie recently. Because if I look back on my life and the relationships that I was in, I remember those people at that age when they were, because that's when these things were happening. Because we tend to hold on to things from our past that we bring into our own reality and think that it would be the same way now as it was back then. And that's just not always the case. We do grow up and we do move on, and the movie tells us that that's okay. Which is why I think that visual gap between the two characters is so important, because even though you think that it should be this way, that destiny and fate and God's plan are leading you towards this thing, it doesn't mean that it's supposed to work out. I don't really have any big glaring flaws other than the fact that it does kind of feel like it's moving somewhat slowly. There are elements of this movie that reminded me of other A24 films like A Ghost Story, The Florida Project. There's even a little bit of the Before trilogy in there too, just because of the time gap, and there's 3 different time changes throughout the movie. It's like they took the whole Before trilogy and put it in a 2-hour movie, which that is something I'm going to praise also. I am so tired of sitting through 2.5-hour long movies every other week. This movie is 1 hour and 46 minutes. I was in and out in 2 hours. So nice. Now that I've complained about long run times, am I still going to do the Barbie and Oppenheimer double feature? Duh. But yeah, sorry. Got off track a little bit. Another thing that I noticed is that there are 2 characters that you think are going to react a certain way or interact a certain way because of how the scene sets up something, because your mind is just so used to the movie cliches of Hollywood. Like when someone says, hey, I have to wait 2 minutes for my Uber to show up, they're waiting for 2 minutes, and so are you. And nothing is happening until the car shows up. Because that, my friends, is true A24 fashion. It's not a glaring issue, it's just something that I was like, okay, nothing happened, all right, that's fine. It's life. I didn't love this movie as much as I thought I was going to. I thought this movie was going to emotionally destroy me. I actually only teared up at the very end, because there is something that is set up early on in the film that comes back around, and I thought how it was executed was really touching and very emotional, to say the least. Well, guys, I hope you get the chance to check out Past Lives. I know that when I saw it, it was like the last day that it was going to be showing in my hometown. So hopefully there is a chance for you guys to see it wherever you are. I know I didn't review The Flash, I didn't review Indiana Jones, because I feel the same about both of them, and I don't have a lot of nice things to say. And I just think the internet's already filled with enough negativity, so I don't really see myself putting a lot of negative reviews out there, because then I have to take time to set up my camera, say the things I need to say, and then hear myself over and over again in the editing room, and it just weighs down on me. And if it weighs on me, I can guarantee you it's going to weigh on you too, and I'm not going to do that to you. I will be seeing Mission Impossible either tomorrow or sometime this week, so I will be getting that review out as well. In the meantime, thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Please like and subscribe as always, and I will see you again soon.